I've been playing chess for 30 years, I became a Grandmaster, and over the last 15 years I coached hundreds of people personally and thousands went through my online training courses. Here are the 7 main tips I learned to speed up your chess progress. And the very first tip is understand openings, don't memorize them. We're heading to the Lichess database of games, and let me illustrate what I mean. Let's say white goes pawn d4 and you respond with pawn to d6. Now, there are a lot of players nowadays who play the London system. They wish to play this move bishop to f4. Even though after you played pawn to d6, the move does not make any sense, and yet you can still see that this is one of the top choices of white. Now, what's the problem? Well, since you played pawn to d6, you now have this barrier of pawns, right, that are controlling this whole diagonal, and therefore the bishop on f4 is completely dull. It does not attack anything. Now, in the main line of the London system, it makes a lot of sense because usually black goes pawn d5, and then as white goes bishop f4, it has this pretty nice diagonal. It reinforces control over the square e5. Maybe in the future white can bring the knight there, and it certainly makes sense. But after pawn d6, it doesn't, and white still plays that move. Moreover, even after the second most played move, knight f3, if we continue that line, knight f6, you can still see that the second most played move here is bishop f4, which still doesn't make any sense. But let's continue. Let's say they go bishop f4, and you play, again, something that they did not expect, pawn c5, for example. Now you can see that the top choice of white is pawn e3, and then there is also pawn c3, which is also pretty common. Now some folks played pawn takes c5, but these are only 23% of players, even though in this position pawn takes c5 seems like the most natural move to play, because if black were to recapture similarly, white would be able to trade queens, force the king to move, and that would be bad for black. Therefore, still you can see that white is missing this potential opportunity, and they're just playing moves that they're taught to play. Let's say they play pawn e3, and you go, again, let's surprise them somehow. We play queen b6, all right? Now, what's the top choice? Pawn b3. Again, a bad move. Why? Because black clearly violates all of the opening rules. They're playing pawn moves and queen moves. They're ready to play the other queen move. They're violating development, right? They're not even trying to develop. And therefore, those guys who played knight to c3 definitely made a better choice. Like white still should be more aggressive. They should play knight c3 and then something like this, aiming for the c7 square. But again, only 24% of players played that. And the rest played b3 or queen to c1. White is still trying to hold on to their London setup. Let's say they go pawn b3. And now, again, let me play some weird move, which they did not expect. Knight to c6. All right. Now, we're attacking this pawn. We have added the third attacker. We've got the pawn, knight, and queen. Therefore, white needs to do something about this pawn. Like, what should white do? Well, the pawn is attacked. But even without this attack, I'd say that it's pretty clear that white should push this pawn forward and chase away this knight. That clearly demonstrates that knight c6 actually was a bad idea for black, because this knight can be driven away right away after pawn d5. And yet, pretty much nobody played pawn d5, only 7%. Most players tried to defend it with either pawn to c3 or knight to c3. Again, does not make any sense. So pawn d5 is obviously a much better choice, but they're still sticking to their London setup. And now let's say as we trade and then go pawn e5, now they have to pay the price for mechanically following that London setup without trying to understand what the heck is actually going on here on the board. Now this bishop on f4, which so far was dull, now is actually giving black extra tempos for their own attack. Now after this trade, this bishop is again attacked. Let's say bishop e3, what they play, bishop c5. And after this trade, if I turn on the edging, it'll probably show decent advantage for black. It shows minus 0.9, but I think in reality it's even greater. The position looks to me pretty sad for white. Just notice that within the first 9 moves of the game, white remarkably achieved nothing. All of their pieces are on their starting squares, and they also created some weaknesses. And you are ready to play knight f6, bishop g4, rook d8, and attack however you like it. I think that in reality, white is very close to like being destroyed quickly, because in order to save this, white will have to come up with very precise defensive moves. So that just goes to show you how playing moves that you memorized can really lead you to disaster. And an interesting fact is, if white were trying to come up with their own moves, they would probably pick something better compared to them trying to just play out moves that they memorized. The second tip is your opponent has an equal say in the game. And this is probably the most painful idea, because we lose a ton of games because we don't follow this advice. Once again, I've opened the database of games to prove the point. Here, at this point, white's last move was queen to g4. And now let's look at the stats. The second most played move by black is knight to f6, which is a big blunder, blundering queen takes g7, hitting the rook and destroying the black's position. Also, what's interesting is there were folks, 3,500 approximately, who found the move pawn to d5, which is again quite an advanced level tactical idea. It opens up this discovered attack while attacking the bishop on c4, and these players managed to notice these advanced level tactics but missed a simple one-move capture queen takes g7. How come? It's not that their tactical vision is lacking or their calculation abilities are lacking, it's just that they're not paying equal attention to their opponent. Moreover, what was the reason of this move queen to g4? Clearly there's only one potential purpose, is to capture this pawn. And black could overlook this just by not thinking about their opponent at all. Moreover, after knight f6, and white happily captures right here, notice that right here, the second most played move, and it's almost about as popular as the first most played move, rook to g8. Again, black noticed that they can hit the queen, and they're hoping that this gives them an extra tempo for doing something, but they're missing this queen to f7 checkmate. Again, it's not that queen takes f7 is a super duper advanced level move, it is just that black is not focused on their opponent. They're just focusing on their own ideas. They're thinking, oh, I'm attacking the queen, it's so cool, it's gonna come back, and maybe I can attack it again, or grab this pawn and attack this pawn, and life's good. We're just not paying equal attention to our opponent and what he's going to do. And the tip that you can apply to this or any other position is very simple. First of all, after your opponent plays a move, ask yourself, what is his idea? What is he going to do next? And secondly, you gotta develop this habit of looking at your half of the board and asking yourself, how can my opponent move forward to this side of the board and do some damage? Because these are the only moves that you need to care. If you go knight f6, you don't care if the queen moves in any backward direction, because those moves are certainly not dangerous for you. The only direction of the queen movement that you need to actually watch over is the forward movement. You gotta look this way and ask yourself, is there any dangerous that my opponent can do while moving forward onto my half of the board? The next tip is strive for the activity of your pieces. And that is the golden rule of chess. That is the most important guideline that you need to follow. Really, that's what chess is all about. And by the way, what is an activity of your pieces? Simply, this is quantity of squares under their control. But think about this. Let's say you have a sniper, but he's suffering from diarrhea, and he's sitting in a men's room. Now, currently, what is his level of influence over the battlefield? Right, it is 0. You gotta provide that larger area of effect for your warriors, for your pieces, and in chess it is called activity. Initially, when I started playing chess, I was playing that London system, which is so popular for its simplicity, and I also liked it for the same reason. But later, I got a good coach who was an international master himself, and he provided really great advice, and he told me that this is a donkey opening, that it's too stubborn, and I'll never learn to attack if I just keep playing this scheme. And instead, he forced me to play gambits, to play aggressive openings, which indeed forced me to become a much more active player. For example, look at this position. I'm playing white against an Indian master, Rohit Gaujaneni, and it is white to move. Now, at this point, I skipped the first opening moves because they're not that critical. Right now, the last black's move was pawn to b5. It is clear that black wants to push this pawn forward, attack this knight. If the knight goes away, and by the way, there are no convenient squares for the knight to go to, that would also drop this pawn on e4, or maybe black wants to jump with his knight to c4 and also attack a bunch of stuff right there. Therefore, black is clearly moving forward and attacking. And that is kind of forcing me to do something. I can't just play waiting moves, I have to counterattack. I understand that the position is more tensed and I need to be active. Right, so those are the openings that you wish to play. By the way, what does it mean more practically to seek activity of your pieces? One of the first advices is just to go forward and attack, because when you attack, you inevitably increase activity of your pieces. The second thing is to open up files for your pieces. And here I played pawn e5, which serves both of these purposes. First off, it is an attacking move. And secondly, after this trade on e5, now black can't take here straight away because that would lose the knight on a5, so they have to trade here first. I took with the c-pawn to open up this file also, and after queen takes e5 and rook to e1, notice that although there are no straightforward threats that white has here, besides some potential x-ray, like now I've got these open files for my pieces. I've got open diagonals for my bishops. They all are very active, and therefore there is a great likelihood that I will be able to generate certain tangible threats within the next couple moves. By the way, a computer is not a big fan of this whole idea. It says that black was fine even after queen takes h2, which seems to be dangerous from the human perspective. But in chess also, we shouldn't always listen to Stockfish, because Stockfish assumes perfect play from a 3500 rated opponent, but in reality you're facing humans who are not capable of playing perfect chess. So in chess it usually is a great idea to sacrifice a pawn or even a piece sometimes just for being active, for attacking. Like here black was not comfortable with this opposition, and he played queen to c7, which is a much more human move compared to queen takes h2, but in reality turns out to be already wrong, because now after bishop to f4 the queen is attacked, but on the next move after black does whatever, for example he played queen to b7, now white can sack the rook right here on e6, check, and white is winning the game because if the rook is captured. Here comes bishop to g6. Notice how active the white pieces are. And after king to e7, it's queen to d6, checkmate. And the attack kind of came naturally because the pieces were active and I was just looking for ways to go forward and generate certain threats. The next tip is rather psychological. Do not play for a draw against stronger opponents. There was one game which was particularly painful for me. I was playing black against the Grandmaster, and at the time I wasn't international master, and therefore you can even see based on my opening choice that I'm already trying to play this symmetric Petrov's defense. And then he played knight to c3, and I kind of knew that I should play bishop f5 and maintain the tension, right? However, instead I was trying to play solidly against the Grandmaster, so I was trying to trade off pieces. And instead of maintaining the pressure and playing the strongest move possible, I decided to trade off. So he exchanged, but now this bishop is active along this diagonal, which is nice for white. Now, at this point, I felt that bishop g4 would probably be a better option to develop the bishop and to pin the knight. However, then I realized that, there's this generic tip which states that you should try to castle early in the game to avoid any dangers. You've seen that my king is on the open file, so I decided to castle instead, again playing more solidly. However, white played h3 and took away this opportunity. And now I can't develop the bishop here. I also can't develop it here because previously I opened up this juicy diagonal for his bishop, and therefore it controls this square. So now I'm kind of stuck. I had to play this bishop e6, making my bishop a tall pawn in between these two. He goes rook b1, hitting this pawn on b7. And yet again, I felt that b6 should be a correct move, but then I felt, oh, there are some weaknesses right here on the queen side. Maybe he's going to go bishop b5. I'm not sure what to do after that. And I decided to, again, play solidly rook b8. Now, there is an obvious downside that now my rook is tied down to the defense of the pawn and is not doing anything, and this is a lousy situation for such a strong piece as rook. After this, white played rook e1, and referring back to that subject of activity, you can see that white is active all over the place. He controls all the files, all the diagonals, he's very active. If I just draw all these arrows, you can see that white is really controlling the game. And at this point, it's really getting very hard for black to do anything. I played h6, and honestly, I didn't really even know what to do here. White went knight h2, trying to potentially open up this diagonal for the queen. I played rook e8, and again, at this point, it's pretty hard for black actually to come up with good moves, but white played quite a strong move, rook takes c6, really great sacrifice. I overlooked it, but the position again was very unpleasant already. After pawn takes and queen to g4, it turns out that white's got a winning attack. He's attacking this pawn, he wants to go inside with queen g6, queen h7, along this diagonal. Also because of this pin along this file, bishop takes h6 is coming, but mostly it's simply like queen g6, queen h7, and I lost the game within the next several moves. That was a very painful devastation for me, and it was especially annoying because I felt that I was playing second best moves just because of the respect to a Grandmaster. And of course I learned the lesson, and what I realized is, hey, if my opponent is stronger than me, it doesn't make any sense for me to actually play passively and make their life even easier. I should do the opposite of that. I should complicate matters. I should attack. That's my only chance. And also, stronger opponents are usually better at endgames and positional play anyways, and therefore trading off pieces is certainly not a good strategy. By the way, I've noticed, especially, I don't know exactly why, maybe you guys can tell me, but I had a lot of students from the USA, and especially when I analyze games from kids tournaments, I see many of them are playing for a draw against higher rated opponents. I'm not exactly sure why. I guess they're pressured by the parents or coaches, or because they feel the responsibility for the result. But anyway, that's certainly a wrong strategy. They should play for a win, and that's how they learn to play good chess. The next tip is don't just play, analyze your games sometimes. Now, I understand that we all love playing blitz games and we play a lot of them, and let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. Let's say you played this game. You played d4, your opponent sacked the pawn, you captured it, he goes bishop c5, you develop a knight, he plays pawn d6, you capture, he goes knight e7, and after you captured the knight thinking that it was a mouse slip or whatever, here comes bishop takes f2, and all of a sudden you realize that you lost the game because in the next move you're going to lose the queen down here on d1. Now, what did you learn from this game? Like, the first impulse is just to say, oh, I was unaware of this opening trap. Cool. But if you actually go back and go through this game with computer, then you will see that right here in this position, the computer tells you that you shouldn't take here on d6 anyways, regardless of whether there's a trap down the line or not. That bishop f4 is a much stronger move because you actually increase the pressure. And now if black captures right here, good luck for them. You're going to capture here, force their king to move, and then you're going to get this pawn back while keep attacking, and you have an absolutely great position. Therefore, bishop f4 certainly puts greater pressure on them. And then if you take on d6, it will be reinforced by this bishop shooting down this diagonal. Therefore, if you actually go through this game with a computer, you'll realize that, so when I'm offered this opportunity to trade a pawn for a pawn, next time I should not automatically capture, but if possible, I should maintain the tension and increase the tension, because to take is a mistake. That's how you learn from every iteration and get better from the games that you play. Because otherwise there are people who play thousands of games, but their level is still the same because they just use the same skill set and they play similarly all the time. By the way, if you want me to help you in your chess journey, then of course I'll be happy to do so. And you can check out my course called Level Up Your Chess by clicking the link below the video in the description. And this course contains different chapters dedicated to all important sections, aspects of chess improvement: opening, middle game, end game, how to avoid blunders, how to improve at chess, like how to train efficiently and whatnot. And because I've been coaching a lot and I know that you guys don't even finish my courses, I designed this course in a way where even studying just one of those chapters will bring you to the next level. So that's my big promise with this course. The next tip is, when you're on tilt, stop. In this position I was playing black, it was my move to play, and I played rook to f8, which turned out to be a blunder after pawn g4. I'm just losing a piece without any compensation, and basically it's time to resign. And after the game I thought to myself, wait a second, why didn't I play knight f4 here? Because all my previous moves were to prepare that jump. I was playing h6, g5, knight f6 to h5. I played a bunch of moves to put my knight to f4, but for some reason I didn't ultimately, and instead played a move which was a one-move blunder. And sometimes you just notice that things aren't going your way, that you're playing below your usual potential, that you're blundering more often, you're forgetting about the time, and then you lose on time, etc. And then when you realize that your rating drops, instead of trying to get your revenge and to get it back, it's better to actually quit and come back refreshed later. And the next tip is, focus on playing good moves. As trivial as it sounds, it is actually helpful. Because people often tell me that, Igor, my goal is to get to the level of 1200 or 1500 or 2000 or whatever it may be, but everything will happen as a byproduct of you playing good moves. Let me also show you one example. I'll skip through a couple opening moves. I'm playing black against Russian Grandmaster Artur Gabrielian, and somewhere here, initially I thought, oh, he's preparing that standard kingside attack. He wants to play queen d2, target this pawn and castle queenside, and somehow push his kingside pawns forward, maybe h5 or maybe the other one forward. Like, looks a little bit scary. And I understood that I need to counterattack quickly, but I couldn't easily see how to do that, because normally black would wish to play d5, but now it's not easy because white is attacking here, and an exchange on d4 also doesn't look very appealing because that helps white to put this bishop to an active diagonal, maybe to kick e5 on the next move. So initially I was a little bit like hesitant and not really sure what to do, but then I just reminded myself that, hey, so far I've been playing good moves. I was just developing my pieces and castling. I was just following all standard chess advice, and therefore my position cannot be bad. So that is also a liberating thought. Also, if your opponent is higher rated, it doesn't matter as long as you play good moves. If you play good moves, you can't lose. Now, so I played pawn a6 first to kick out this bishop. He went back to c4 also to reinforce control over the square. But the beauty of this thinking is that, again, you realize that if your position is good, then his attack cannot be dangerous. Moreover, if we could ask Stockfish, and it can tell us its opinion based on the evaluation, it would probably say that hasty attacks in an opening, such as this h4 thing, are usually not good and should backfire. And armed with this understanding, we now can be less scared and can seek for something more aggressive to counter that and to refute that idea. Alright, so I played knight a5, trying to kick off this bishop from here, and after white went back, here black can finally strike in the center with d5. White certainly does not want to trade off and open up this e-file for the black rook to attack everything, so he played e5, trying to gain a tempo, but the knight comes forward, and now this pawn is attacked on e5, plus some knight g threats are coming. Anyway, White decided to defend this pawn by going pawn f4, but here comes c5, and White actually just resigned. Now the knight's been attacked on d4, but if the knight moves, there is d4 with this double attack, and White is losing a piece, plus here on the king side, there are also some troubles. And therefore, the White position fell apart pretty quickly and easily. But again, the idea was that I realized that I should just play good moves and my position cannot be bad. I hope this was helpful. Let me know if you have any questions and comments down below, and I'll talk to you soon.